What's up, y'all? It's Claude Kelly.
Hey, this is Chuck Harmony.
Welcome to Tiny Book Club.
Yeah, we're back.
We're back. And it's about time.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since we're doing this, and it's actually the first time we're doing this on camera. So this is something we've been doing. It's special, but we're not doing it alone.
Mm-hmm. We brought some of our good friends with us. Actually, our day ones.
Yeah.
People that started this journey with us a few years back. We're here to discuss the first book that we've ever done at Tiny Book Club called The Animal Farm.
Animal Farm is so relevant now. It was relevant when we first talked about it. And so you still get to see us have a really raw, honest, respectful, but real conversation. And we're gonna eat some good food.
Let's get into it.
Let's go. Officially, what's up, y'all? I'm Claude Kelly.
What's up? I'm Chuck Harmony.
And welcome to our first live Tiny Book Club.
TBC.
We are in our home. I call this like home base.
Yeah.
Everyone who's here, this is like our hideout. Weirdo Workshop is where it all happens. The music, the family, the therapy, and of course Tiny Book Club.
Yeah.
So this means a lot to us. I'm sure through the conversation we'll talk about the personal connections we have, because there's a lot of them, and I think that's also a big part of why this means so much to us. But just in case this hasn't happened, I think we should go around the room and have everyone just say your name.
Okay.
Yes, we'll start over on this side with ladies first.
Ladies first.
Hey. Well, hey, I'm Kelly Halford. That's my name.
That's really like
I'm Giovanni. I'm Eric Ackelberger.
I'm Angela Grant.
I'm Beth Ray Beck Hall.
I'm Tamara Shanice, aka Texas Tam.
I am Stacey Shandella, also Stacey Johnson.
Yes, indeed.
I'm Melanie.
David Mullen.
I'm Sada.
Cameron Keith Walls.
And I'm Heather.
And this is like literally family.
And in case you don't know who these people are, these are our day ones.
Our day ones.
Tiny Book
Yes.
Yep.
So,
Yes, period. Okay.
So this is family right here.
before we get into the book, I want to start with that conversation first, because Tiny Book Club was our way of, first of all, trying to find just family, tribe, like-minded people when we moved here. So it's been like 10 years now, almost 9 to 10 years now.
That sounds like
a long time.
Yeah.
But we moved here, and it was just the whole moving process, and finding this house was stressful. We were all kind of like, we want to get back to reading. So the idea came to us, and then we just started like, with the book we're going to talk about, Animal Farm, just word of mouth. Like, ask someone if they might want to come and talk about this book. And somehow that led to this community that's like, the database of people who've been in Tiny Book Club is, how many people? Like over 1,000 people.
It's crazy.
Tell them why it's Tiny Book Club.
It's
tiny.
Well, the truth is, everyone here is also very important, and they have a lot going on in their life. So it's hard to get us all together, but ourselves included. So the whole idea was just, if we could get together for a book that's under 200 pages, like Animal Farm, then at least everyone will have a chance of reading it and being able to have time to just think about it before we get together. It shouldn't feel like work. There are great big books, we know that, but to ask someone to read an 800-page book every month would not be fair. And there's so many books that are small that pack a big punch. We've talked about a lot of them. There's so many more, but that's the reason we call it Tiny Book Club. And since we did it like this, we've done it here up to like 100 people. We did it in Nashville. We've done versions in Atlanta and California,
New York,
all over the place. And so COVID kind of threw us for a loop with just being able to be in person. And then everyone I think was trying to get back to something, to our normalcy. And it took us a while to get back here, but we really, 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 really missed Tiny Book Club.
Yeah, we did too.
Like, just
You're not the only one.
just making sure we're not crazy. Just make sure you're not just here for the dinner, because there's a dinner out there too. Although the dinner is about to be slapped down. I wish you could smell. What's happening?
And we're excited.
But the crazy thing about it is that, Chuck, you tell him, like, this is why this book. Why did we choose this one now? This one's book is special.
I mean, this is the first book that we started with. You know, we always try to choose books that's relevant to the times. We don't want to have conversations that are irrelevant, and so this book was relevant when we started Tiny Book Club, and it's even more relevant right
It
now.
is.
You know what I'm saying? And so I'm always excited to hear different perspectives. I'm not excited to hear the same perspective. I'm excited to hear different perspectives so I can learn.
Yeah.
And I can grow. And I think with this table right here, we can grow. You know what I'm saying? We made sure that we picked people that understood the assignment.
The assignment.
To read the book, to digest the book, and to have
Oh my God.
to have a perspective on the book. You know what I'm saying?
This first of all, this is awesome. So when we first did Tiny Book Club, we sent the book to everyone with a custom Weirdo Workshop Tiny Book cover. This is the OG cover.
The OG cover.
I got my original too.
This is Weirdo stamp in there and everything.
Okay.
That's crazy.
That was
July-
access. You still have that.
July 2017.
Yeah. That was your ticket into the door.
That was the
That was your
ticket.
ticket.
Yeah.
You have to bring the book to. So that's like very special.
Oh, she bought hers too.
I
did.
Team Tam and Team Stace are still equal right now.
Here we go.
But it was the first book we read. A lot has changed in the world since we talked about it last time. I think we've all changed a lot since the last time we talked about this. So there's firstly how the book makes you feel and who you relate to, but then I also want to have a secondary conversation because we know each other about what was different about it this time. Like, how did you interpret it differently as we are a little bit older, a little wiser, and as the world is a little different, but also a little bit the same. So, I mean, the best place to open up is just, Stacey was asking this downstairs, but what were you asking everyone downstairs? You were asking?
I was asking which animal you would want to be. And I was asking because I read it this time to my niece, who is 10 years old, and she lives in Florida, and we talk all the time. And as I was reading it to her, she just, like, in the middle of the book was like, I want to be Molly.
Yep.
And I was like,
Who said yeah?
That's me.
Molly?
Okay.
I was like, wait, because Molly's character, like, she just leaves. She's like, she leaves the whole fight behind. And she wanted her sugar cubes and her ribbons. And she kind of, before when I read it, I was like, okay, Molly is like the vanity of us as people. She wants the things, she wanted to look at herself and she wanted to feel beautiful, and that's the vanity of what we can do as people sometimes, is put like ourselves so like in the forefront that we forget that there's more than just us, and there's a whole like community or generation behind us, and when we're gone, what have we left behind? And Molly,
The Kardashians.
before, right? She was like, to me before, I was just like, oh, I couldn't be Molly. She's just too, she just left. But now I'm like,
He's like, now I want my shirt. You want your shirt?
That's smart.
Okay.
sugar cube right about now. Because it just kind of circles back. You find yourself kind of circling back to the same lessons, and you're like, I feel like I fought a lot since we read it last, in the last 10 or 7 years or whenever. But do I want to do another 7 years of that? Or do I just want to take a sugar cube and go sit in the corner with a ribbon and just be cool and just, be pampered a little?
That's fair.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's how I feel, honestly, as a Black woman. You've been boxer all your life. And then you just want to experience the soft life.
Yeah.
Be a Molly.
Right.
Yeah, be a Molly, get your sugar cubes. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I felt.
So which animal would you guys?
Ooh. So you would be Molly as well?
I would be Molly. I'm sorry.
I was like, it's Molly's. It's Molly's in the house.
I would like
Really?
to be Molly,
Yeah.
but I feel like I am boxer in that we're just in this ant race, right? Like, we're constantly working, and he worked, and then at the very end was only dreaming about how his time in the field of doing nothing was going to be. He didn't get to have any of that soft life, where Molly was like, I see what's coming, so I'm going to go get my sugar cube, and I'm going to be pet, and I'm going to be taken care of. But boxer had the exact opposite experience.
I feel that.
You feel that?
Heavy. I feel because my outlook and feeling like boxer is I care too much about the world around me to not let it work.
Mhm.
So I do a lot of work to make sure it works, even if it's serving everyone else at a higher capacity. And like I work in higher education. My institution is dealing with a lot with the state. It's dealing with a lot as a byproduct of the current administration. But I got them students that I cannot not make sure the ship works for because they live here.
Mm.
And so, as frustrated as I may be, and as much as I mean, literally, Kelly can tell you about 2 weeks ago, I was like, so if I just quit and leave. But it really wasn't an option. It wasn't an option, not only because circumstantially figuring it out would have been a problem, but it wasn't an option because if I quit and leave, what about all of them? And so, and so I feel Boxer heavily because he was a workhorse anyway, but he went extra hard because the farm had to be tended to.
All right, so let me ask you this though. Do you feel like you've been, pun intended, boxed into being Boxer? Or mean like if none of that mattered, what would you still be Boxer?
I think because of integrity, I'm Boxer.
That came up a lot for me, integrity.
Yeah, I think it's because of integrity. Because if I was less integral, like some people I know in the world,
a lot of people
went a different way. I could have went a very different way.
And that's what's so crazy about the story about Boxer. It's about the concept that hard work means integrity. You know what I'm saying? And that's I mean, you can argue both points. Like hard work in some instances when you could talk about survival, hard work plays an important role. But also I've learned being a boxer that hard work also is not the only way to be effective.
Otherwise you end up in a glue factory.
Because literally
going to the retirement.
Literally work harder, work smarter can be applicable in life.
That was kind of my thing because the first time I read it, I felt like Boxer. I'm not sure I loved that I related to Boxer because you feel like
that kind of.
I was like I don't like that. I don't know how to treat myself, right?
That part.
But now, a couple years later, I'm like, I'm about survival. So all the characters that I looked down on before, the cat, Benjamin, I was like, I'm kind of not mad. You're finding a way to not get, to stay away from the bullshit.
That's interesting because, I've read this. First time I read it, I was in 4th grade.
Yeah.
In 4th grade, you're a 10-year-old kid. Like, Boxer, oh God, Boxer. They killed Boxer. Crushed me. And then I read it again right about I was going into college, and I was like, oh, I'm Benjamin for sure.
Yes.
All you guys are
I'm staying with
this stuff, you know. But then I think probably the last 3 or 4 times I've read it, it's been the same character for me, and it's been Snowball. I know nobody says that, but look, sometimes you need a revolution, and you say, okay, things need to change, and you're like, okay, and if the revolution is successful, what's going to take its place? You need people who are intelligent enough to craft the thing that's going to replace the thing you're erasing. Otherwise, it just repeats itself. Now I know Orwell is saying it's inevitable that it's just going to repeat itself, but you need people like Snowball who are actually, hey, I'm thinking, I'm engaging with my talents, and maybe we need to do it like this. Are we going to go into how this is just a thinly veiled fable on the Russian Revolution? Yeah, so
go on top of it.
In the end, Snowballs actually, if you're not as powerful as the Napoleons, the Stalins, you just end up like Boxer.
Well, the thing is, we don't really know what happens to Snowball.
That's what I'm saying.
So he could have lived a great life.
Napoleon hired someone from Pinchfield Farm to track him down in Mexico and stick a
For all we know, Snowball is living a good life in a pasture somewhere.
On Sugar Candy Mountain.
Exactly.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. So I was going to say also I would choose, and I just thought about this talking to Kelly just now. And I'm sorry, conversation. Sorry, not sorry. Moses, as I would be the bird, talking about Sugar Candy Mountain. There is a place of rest and of beauty that you can go.
He was a hope dealer.
He was, and I tend to be that at times.
That's good though.
I tend to be, especially in what I do, right, and dealing with people talking about grief and how you can see beyond what is in front of your face. And I can only say that because I've had to do that several times. And so on the spiritual journey that I'm on right now, I realize there is beauty in rest. Like
Right.
there is beauty, like
Right.
there's beauty in work, but there's so much beauty and accomplishment and rest. And what Napoleon unfortunately instilled was fear.
Yeah.
By using his henchmen dogs, you know, to scare off Snowball, to start things, to when I feel like I want to say my piece, I get shut down because now your dogs are barking at me. So it's not that I'm afraid of my truth. I'm now afraid of the dogs. I'm not afraid of what's within me.
Yeah.
I'm afraid of what's without, what's in external. And so it's
it also
like,
helps to have wings.
Exactly. Also, right, you know what I'm saying? Since we rise above, when they go low, what do? We go high. Okay? We fly.
As soon as there's pressure, I'm out of here.
Right. But also because I can fly, I can also see other places that you can't.
Yeah.
And I can tell you what I've seen.
That's a good perspective.
Unless you're Moses and you just make stuff up.
Right. I mean, if you don't know, you don't know. Okay.
But you don't know because also he could have seen things that you genuinely you're getting from the perspective of everyone who's in this farm. So technically, a bird could have truly seen things you have no idea.
Bird's eye view.
Literally
just like Jonathan
That's my
Livingston
thing too. Like I didn't
Yes.
think anybody else would say
Second.
Moses, but I also felt kind of Moses too. I'm like, yeah, none of y'all systems work, and I don't care who you plug into the problem. This is just going to repeat the cycle.
Right,
Right.
What's happened to me that's different since the first time we read this was we were in one administration before, and I was like, it's pretty bad. We went in the next administration. This is really bad too. And now we're in the third administration, and I'm like going, what the heck's going to happen? And I'm just saying, there's got to be a third column. There's got to be a third column.
That's kind of where I feel like I'm still kind of Benjamin-ish, where I'm just kind of saying inside like all you guys are nuts, and none of this is working. So just let me know. I'll be laughing at you as you scribble on the wall and change the rules. He's just kind of chuckling on the side. He's like, I love when he's like, have you ever seen a dead donkey?
Yeah.
He's like, I'm gonna survive all of this mess.
Yeah, I think Benjamin is the important part of this because, yes, there were other farms, there are other places that people could go, but in the reality, some people are stuck in those worlds. So Benjamin was the person that was like, okay, I see what's going on. I'm just gonna do what I keep telling y'all the same thing over and over. So in that world where people are stuck and you can't move to another farm, you can't go to another place, you have to be steadfast, and that's what he did until the end.
Just plotting, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly. I was Ben Moses.
He knew how to play the game.
I also think a boxer being at the age I am now, and I read this, I didn't remember it from high school because, we were all self-absorbed as
high schoolers are.
Yeah, but what rang true for me on this go-round was that for my generation, I was the oldest, that you had to be, this is what you do. You have to be productive. You work hard. And, you stay and pick up the mess after, at church, after everyone else. Or you're nice to the new kids or whatever it is. But you had a role that was really, really drilled into you. And growing up where I grew up, that was just the way it was.
Yeah.
And you never questioned it. So over time, there are, I don't think we were ever told to have boundaries.
Well, the boxer mentality was what was so triggering for me the first time. Wait, Chef, I want you to take a pause for the cause of
Take a
Chef
pause.
Cleveland.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chef Cleveland from the Lost Spoon.
Yes.
And tonight we have something that's very special. What you have in front of you here are the Weirdo Veggies.
Yes.
Fried veggies.
Fried veggies dedicated to the weirdos out there.
Thank you.
We also have a avocado aioli. So I hope you all enjoy. This is a gluten-free, crispy appetizer. So enjoy.
Thank you, Chef.
Thank you, Chef.
Oh my goodness.
I'm so excited to eat your food. I've seen you a lot on social media, and you've done a lot of events that I've, you start to recognize people. So then when I saw that you were going to be here, I was really excited.
I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
This is going to be a lot of love put on the table.
Chef is the
Every Sunday morning between services.
That's so good.
I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to be here.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Heather, you weren't at the
When we were talking about
can you cook
yeah.
there? Oh, my bad.
We were talking about the boxer mentality. Downstairs, I think Eric, we were talking about that generationally, that's been a shift for me because we were taught, like, especially as it pertains to career, that like it looks bad to switch jobs quickly. The longer you stick with it, no matter how abusive or how much you hate it, was a sign of like your tenacity and strength and integrity.
Rise above.
Right. So lots of people that I know stayed in jobs probably too long, with no appreciation, with nothing but like maybe like a thank you or a small part at the end.
A pen.
Or a pen.
Oh yeah.
A little pen.
A card even.
And nowadays I think that like kind of peaked and people realized it wasn't working anymore financially, emotionally, mentally. So the way people are now, even where we're dealing with younger students, interns, even people applying, they're totally different. They don't care at all.
No.
They don't have any allegiance to you.
Nope.
They don't look at jobs as like a thing like I just want to be here for 10 years. They're like, maybe 2 weeks. And if they leave, there's no like, you have to give my 2 weeks notice because God forbid I get a bad reference. They don't care.
And they want to be paid as much as you.
100%. But I envy the freedom of it because the boxer mentality is a mentality that makes you take more than you should. And not speak up for yourself a lot when you know you should. And so watching new generations figure out that boxer might be not so healthy for you. I try to adopt it, but I envy that because I'm like, man, like if I had not put so much weight on lots of stuff, for a lot of people it's college. For a lot of people it's a job that their family wants them to do, but that boxer thing of you stay here and you don't quit until it breaks you. It's been damaging for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a two-edged sword though. Because working in higher education, having that generation, they quit easily. They do everything easily. And one of the things that's oftentimes a concern is in our time growing up, we experienced tough love that might have been borderline abusive.
It was.
One of the terms they used to use that I hated to hear, but I get it now. They said it builds character. And what I see now, working with students that are 17 to 23 every day, is their character is so easily broken. If you hold them to a certain level of accountability, instead of them understanding that is supposed to call them up, they feel like they've been called out. And as a result of being called out, they feel as though it's a personal vendetta versus it's a correction.
A critique.
And a critique.
Well, I would submit that part of that is because we don't actually do, and this is as a person who literally working on something that's specifically about developing leaders, person who consistently works in building teams, developing leaders. They feel that it's a call out because actually no one does the work to actually develop character. People assume that people have it. And so you don't realize that character is a thing to be developed. And part of the way that it is developed is by how the folks around you sort of help to cultivate you. And just like we grow plants and we cultivate the plant and we train it in a direction so that we don't have them just growing everywhere, and we get out and we notice the little imperfections or the weeds, and we do the things to actually pull up the things that aren't supposed to be there that would actually harm the plant. We don't do that with people. Cultivating people has become a lost skill set. We don't really know how. And then we go back and I say this all the time because, I got a 21-year-old and a 19-year-old who they've got, I would say, based upon feedback from people like Cameron, my children have amazing character. But if you knew how much work I did with them and how much work the community's done with them as from, once they could understand English on up to even now, they're adults, but there's things that I still redirect in their character. Like, we need to fix that. Do this way. Ask yourself why you're acting like that. And I also just thinking about boxer, I'm like, has anyone even noticed that had Snowball been able to stay boxer would not have necessarily been so much a work harder person. Because the snowballs of the world are literally, the snowballs of the world and I live as a snowball. We exist so that boxers don't have to live like boxers. Because we say, hey, if you put something that works in place, a process in place, a procedure in place, a plan in place. You don't have to kill Boxer. We can work on a cycle. We can do these things. But the other thing is the snowballs of the earth. We are people. We know that things take time. So we're not trying to get everything quickly. The Napoleons of the earth want it. And the quicker you want a thing, immediate things also bring, they're so imperfect that they're incredibly unscrupulous and flawed. Right. Because you don't take the time to actually think about how this is impacting all of that. However, if I could choose to be anybody in the book, Old Major, I'd rather cast a vision and go on the board.
I was gonna say that.
First chapter.
It changed after we talked more, and I'm sure this has changed because of the times we live in and politics too. But it was interesting to see that all the black women at the table immediately were like Molly.
I'm tired. Okay. I've been working on my life. Right.
Yeah.
I'm
just
Molly.
It was just like universe, like yeah. Because I just didn't think that anyone would relate to Molly, just because of course obviously she seems the most vain, but also now that I've heard everyone explain this, like, nah, I need some pampering. I need to I need some me time. I need to be able to feel like a girl.
Soft life.
Soft season, baby.
And explained to no one why she did it.
Okay. No one. She said no.
But if you knew her, you knew why.
Right. She said I didn't see that man. I didn't know that man.
That's not true.
That man was not.
Right. She was sneaky about it, but.
And then she was gone.
But that's also survival.
Yeah.
That's right.
Her sneakiness was survival.
She didn't care what other people had to say.
Don't show your hand.
Right.
Okay. Molly said, I'm not showing my hand.
Don't worry about it.
Or strategy.
I love hearing about
Now you see me?
everyone's different experience with the different characters. The nuance of the different experiences, everything that we bring to the table individually and collectively. Yeah. But there's Christopher Jackson there was a documentary about Hamilton, and he was talking about the complexities of being a black man playing a white slave owner, and Washington, his take on Washington was like, we are all more than one thing. Mm-hmm. And like the complexities of Washington's life and the complexities of our lives and these animals. So it's like, Molly wasn't just vain. Mm-hmm. She's trying to survive.
She could have just been vain.
I mean, the cat was being the cat, but
except for the cat.
Yeah, the cat was being very cattish, but it's the nuance and the non-duality of being able to exist in more than one thing as a whole person, like the universe inside all of us.
No, I got that this time as well, and also just to add to that, just what kind of was kind of dystopian and sad about the whole thing is when you start to realize that every time that a group of people get the opportunity to be together, those roles present themselves, which puts us in the same cycle all the time. Like at a job, in an organization, sometimes in a family, there's a boxer, there's a Napoleon, there's like, and how just when humans get together, and I thought that was kind of what he was trying to say too, is like beware of this happening when you get together, because you can actually, if you know it, you can do better than to fall for the same things. But I just kept saying, I was like, man, this entire scenario of characters repeats over and over, which is why you don't get anywhere.
It's also like the animals all self-select. Like the sheep all do their thing, the ducks all do their thing, and it sort of shakes out into a natural hierarchy.
Yeah.
Which, if you look at any society, this was written, in response to someone who had experienced the tyranny of the Russian Revolution, but it's the same today. I mean,
that's what was kind of alarming. I was like,
and I'm like,
changed.
it's like in the South, we're still fighting the Civil War. Why?
Yes.
Because
we call it the war between the states.
New Napoleon's still taking over.
Well, I remember in college when I came here to Nashville in 1973, my professor called it the War of Northern Aggression, and I looked at him. I said, "Excuse me, it was the Civil War, and we won." But it's still, if you look at the divisions that are being created, what is happening right now in our time is the leaders, the Napoleons of the world, and his little dogs are sort of saying, put yourself in a category. Are you a government worker? Are you a this? Or we're going to take away the benefits? Or maybe the post office is going away. I mean, it's kind of like they are creating class division, which is already there.
Yeah.
But this is much more extreme. And, you know, so you look at what they did with the dogs, and that's ice.
They didn't even, the dogs didn't have a shot.
So what got me with the dogs, and I think that a lot of people overlook it, is the dogs were puppies that lost their mother.
Right.
Napoleon took them away from everyone else, and no one else came to see about them.
Isolation.
That's crazy.
What happened?
Right.
I know no one even asked.
No one asked. And so here it was, he
Thank
took
you.
the dogs and reared them away from the rest of the farm
Yes.
and turned them into his guard dogs.
Right.
But no one ever asked where the puppies were. And to me that is an allegory for even what's happening with the educational system. We're literally watching education be ripped down, which
Like
is going to
banning
leave,
books.
which is literally going to
Manipulating
leave
history.
a void, and then somebody's going to teach somebody something.
Right.
Well, you know,
And I think under the guise of Napoleon, he tried to use it as, you know, we can use the youth to better our society, but he was manipulative in that. Which is, yes, we do need the youth. They need to learn something different. They don't need to be a boxer. They don't need to do the things that we accepted for so long. But to manipulate them is why everybody was like, oh, okay, well, he's doing something good. He's doing, you know, they do need to learn something different. But of course, as we know, he had sinister motives.
They also made the animals, if you remember in the beginning, after the animal rebellion, they had all these ideals and they put them up on the wall. And there are several references to, I can't remember the specific, but some of the animals just couldn't really remember beyond one or two.
Because they couldn't read.
And so they were like,
Chickens went off.
so what are they doing now in our country? They're taking away, I mean, I have a 4-year-old grandson and a 2-year-old granddaughter, and I found out at work one day that Wilson County has banned Charlotte's Web. Because, and I said, one of my coworkers lives there and she has 6 kids. And I said, Julie, what are you talking about? She says, because it's satanic talking animals.
Charlotte's Web?
What?
But
they watch
that's even part of
the
the deeper, you know, just like when they make up stories about, well, maybe you remember that incorrectly.
Right.
They're banning certain books and they're making
Gaslighting.
public education look so. You know, we had a Christmas party. Angela has a wonderful Christmas party for powerful women, and we talk about wonderful things. And this was several of them were talking about how terrible the public education system, and they're already looking at private schools, which is what we've all watched them do recently in Tennessee, the voucher program, right? But they're manipulating and purposefully making public school look terrible and have terrible attributes so that we will turn towards and go towards the scam, right? Privatizing schools.
Well, did anyone else think about the fact that if that's happening, how much has it happened to you? Like the idea that like, well, that you don't remember, that's not how it happened, or you look away and you look back and the rules have a couple more words on them.
Even simply
think about that religiously.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
right.
what's happening
But
in
also in Nashville,
Yeah,
just being in Nashville, I'm born and raised in Nashville, and there are certain blocks that I go to that I'm like, what was here? I don't even remember. Oh my God, they have gentrified my brain. Okay, like they have erased. Right, and
you get used to it so fast.
Exactly. Yeah. And I get caught up in. Can I tell you, East Nashville, okay, was not user friendly when I was growing up. And I'm saying that in the best way. Okay, North Nashville. Okay, nobody was walking their dog on Lishy with their ponytails flowing.
And now it's like 101 Dalmatians. And I see it. Yeah, literally.
Gulch literally means where wastewater flows. And now now we're all about let's go, and I'm guilty of it. I be in the Gulch, I be in East Nashville. Okay, I'm in the streets.
I'm in the streets.
But I've earned it.
Sushi in the Gulch for all.
You know the history.
Okay.
I know, but I know the history, and I do miss it. I used to not want to like say that I was from here because if I told people from New York, we have a friend named Lenara, and she would,
of course,
Lenara on camera. But she would be like, "Do you like ride a horse to school?" No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Okay, but to that point, that's a good point about revisionist history. Is that growing up in New York City, the way that the South was painted was very, very specific. Very specific.
Yeah.
It's like they're backwards, they can't read, they're dumb, the whole thing, there's no education. And that's literally how it's taught to you. And then you literally have to travel. A big part of it is that people don't have the privilege of being able to travel, which is a privilege because we're in a big country, big world. But you start to realize if you read books, banned or not banned, you read books, you start to realize how much information is being twisted and how much is being kept from you. And it makes you wonder why, not just even specifically the books they're banning, but why you'd even be banning a book when it's information. And the thing that makes us human is the fact that we can use these in this way.
Reading books like this is the reason that I say this with everything in me, I escaped my small town. I'm from a tiny little sundown town. I moved. It's a choice, right? It's a choice to not be
from a holler.
Literally from multiple hollers. Literally.
Come on, the holler.
Yes.
Oh my God.
But reading is what, and Carly are the reason that I escaped that life and chose to be someone different. I'm not like the people that I went to school with. I can remember when my parents moved me one county over, I grew up the minority where I was the person in the room that didn't look like everybody else. And the first day in a new school at the very next county over, I looked around and I was like, 7th grade, everybody in here is white. Like I vividly remember, I can remember what I was wearing that day. I read this and 1984 in high schoa, and I could see vividly how it was everything that could be, everything that was. Even now, I saw a lot of, before I read it, I didn't necessarily see like how it relates to some things happening in Korea. But if it wasn't for books that are, a lot of them that are now banned, I would have probably stayed in that town, said words I should have been saying to people I shouldn't have been saying it to, and could have chosen to be a completely different person. But luckily, you choose to think when you read books.
And it forces you to think.
100%.
When I reread the book for today, I was left wondering if the animal farm that was intended could have worked, because the animal farm that started animal farm that it ended up being is two totally different things. And I was wondering if the animal farm that was intended could have worked. So I'm going to ask y'all.
That's the question of every revolution.
Yeah.
Every revolution says, this is what we want. This is what we're dreaming about. What we're trying to implement. I mean, Orwell, let's bring it back to what you, Beth, and Corbin, you asked about. It's just saying something about human nature in general, right? Like, are we just doomed to, I'm not a nihilist, but are we just doomed to keep repeating
the same thing?
These
Right,
loops?
that's my fear.
Because and Orwell, he was influenced by, he was born in India, right? His name wasn't even Orwell, he was like Eric Blair or something like that. Yeah. And he served in the Spanish Civil War. He fought on, I can't remember which side, Republican side or something. And anyway, the side that lost. They lost to Franco, became a dictatorship, and it booted him. And then he was like, this was 1933. He was like 30. And he wrote Animal Farm in 1946. And it's hard to read Animal Farm without thinking about 1984, which just came 2 years later, because they're kind of like the same story with different depths, right? One is a parable, the other one is like, hey, just so I'm not trying to dumb it down for you, here's what this really is. So
and that was all the critiques that came. Everybody was like, just say what you mean, dude.
Right, yes. So that's a long preamble to just say, to ask, every revolution, I can only think of one revolution in all of history. And please correct me because I'm asking an open question. And it happens to be the US. There's only one revolution I can think of that succeeded in establishing the society that they wanted, that didn't get usurped by a counter-revolution almost immediately.
Yes. Like, that's a good question because the first question is...
What revolution is that? Let me say,
he said almost immediate.
Most, the US were finding out, it took 300 years. Maybe.
That it didn't work out.
Like, think of it, is there... I mean, French Revolution.
Right.
1789 to 1799, 10 years. Yeah. They cut everybody's head off.
And
then Napoleon was first consul, and then all of a sudden, 5 years later, 1804, I'm emperor.
Yeah.
And he took over everything, right?
Yeah.
Spanish Civil War, Franco took over, dictatorship for 30 years. Same in Italy, Mussolini.
Yeah.
Arab Spring, most recently.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Egypt.
Yeah.
They're like, we all watched this thing on Twitter. Like, we followed it. Oh yeah, we cheered them on. We cheered these guys on because they're doing the right thing, kicking out these dictators. Libya, kick out the dictator. You're oppressing the people. And then as soon as they come in, they put in somebody from Iran.
Yes.
Iran. All these countries.
But that's my
Name one where it didn't end up this way. I can't think of one.
So is it the human condition that?
That's my question. Are you just doomed? We're just doomed.
See, the reason why I asked that because I had a different perspective of Napoleon. Because the first time that I read it for Tiny Book Club, I demonized Napoleon because that's just the thing to do. Like he's the asshole of the thing.
He is.
But then when when you realize that, especially in a capitalist society, there's always a Napoleon. Like when is there not a Napoleon? When is there not a person that gets some power and get drunk with the power or use it? At least use it to their advantage.
Yeah. To your point, capitalism, somebody has to lose for it.
It's designed that
way.
Well,
so
there has to
I'll
be
say
like a
this.
maniac.
The thing is, we talk about power, and I think that's probably part of it. Is in capitalist societies and societies that eventually become like even dictatorships. We like to talk about power. And the thing is, people don't understand that there is a difference between power and authority. And people who actually are thinking about the greater good, they think about what we have, what do we have authority to do? What am I allowed to do? With the authority that I have, how can I do the greatest good for everybody outside of me?
Right.
People who feel unseen and they're insecure about not being seen, and they're baser elements. They're impatient because insecure people also tend to be impatient people. People who feel unseen also tend to be impatient people. Those people, they want things quickly. They're impatient, so they seek power. Because then, when they're powerful, everybody will worship them. Everybody will do what they say. They won't be challenged, and the only way you can do that is through fear. One of the first notes I wrote when I saw that Snowball and Napoleon didn't particularly get along. One, Snowball really wasn't thinking about Napoleon at all.
No.
Snowball's thoughts are, how are we going to make this now that this happens? How is this going to function?
Right.
Napoleon was pissed off constantly because Snowball was smarter.
And so
And
he
Snowball had it. So he made up. So he created an entire narrative in his head, and then he exploited not just Squealer. He exploited. Well, let's start with the actual exploitation began with the sheep.
He exploited Snowball's base. Snowball was naive in that when you're so caught up in your mission, you almost forget that there's people who are.
There's people out
There
to
are
get
bad
you.
people.
Opposition.
But
you're not necessarily thinking that there's obstacles. When we start at this meeting, everybody's sitting at this table.
Right. We're all good.
Right.
And as a person who, and Cameron can testify to this, in the last 3 years, I've had this happen to me how many times?
We've had this happen.
So when I've had this happen directly with me, how many times?
Right.
3 times. In
So
3
what
years,
is
it's been 3 times.
exploitation of is trust. That we started this together. I'm trusting because you said you're smarter. we're trusting you and giving you apples and more milk, that you're going to look out for the greater good of everyone. And what he exploited was everyone's trust. Even Snowball trusted Napoleon.
He actually exploited their ignorance.
Right.
Not even their trust.
Because when you lead with integrity, you don't assume that other people are not doing the same thing.
So, and then what happens when you're an integral person is, one, sometimes when you're a naive integral person, like we said Snowball was, you initially assume that everyone is integral like you.
Right.
But I'll say that after time 3, when Napoleon is arguing with me about what old man Major said, then I need to know. Then that means for in Kelly Halford's world, I'm gonna give you 3 times because I'm finna pay attention to what you're really doing. And the first time I'm like, okay, that might be a one-off. The second time I'm like,
it might be a pattern.
Let me see. The third time we just like baseball. Or even the spirit, the Trinity. You get 3 times. And then I'm like, oh no, that's who you are. And so now I'm not going to even try to change you, but I'm going to govern myself accordingly because now I know I'm not sharing an idea with you. I'm not even letting you know where my ideas are.
Right.
The
question is still there. The question that I was asking, which is the concern for me, is it goes almost to like, are we actually capable of change, right? Because are we predestined to fit into one of these roles at some point and they're always clashing? Or can you rise above it? Because you see the pattern. Like, there's a gazillion examples in history.
Yeah.
Literally, the Last Supper being one of those examples.
And here we are.
There's just all those characters sitting at the table.
Yeah.
The betrayer, the person, all of it's there every time you put people together like that. Yeah. So my question is that just how we are?
I feel like we have to look at it where, okay, now the oppressor is removed.
Come on.
So now we have to ask our questions. Who are we? I think one of the biggest things that I keep learning from this is, okay, the oppressor is removed. So even in, like, say, my own community, the Black community, colorism starts to exist. We start having these classist type of, hierarchies. Even now, gay people in our community, like just different things. So I think, yes, now the oppressor's removed, but I think it may be human nature. But we do have to learn from things like this and ask ourselves the question. The problem is, I don't think a lot of people ask themselves the question.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I think you're right. We don't ask, and the people who can ask die off. Right. They just age out, and they don't pass that knowledge along. Right. So the next generation is just doomed to repeat the same thing.
Twice. There were 2 quotes that have always been powerful to me that I just resonated throughout this book, and one is, "As we act, let us not become the evil which we deplore." But also, he who does not know the history, the events of the past, is doomed to repeat it. And so you see, as they fast forward through all of these years, that while it might be a little bit different, it's still the same.
And so they just react by, I said earlier that some of the animals couldn't remember. Well, the ones who were sitting there going, why are they getting all the apples? What happened? They just make them work harder, so they're so tired.
They can't ask questions.
They can't ask questions. And then the next thing you know, one by one, the rules of the animals are changed to mirror what Napoleon and his henchmen want. But every civilization in the world has fallen because of greed and power. And it doesn't matter if it's a religious society or it's a secular society, because I think, to your point, Claude, there are people who, shame on me, are born with evil or dark instincts that see opportunity in exploiting other people's weaknesses and, taking what they want and they manipulate it through fear and intimidation and bullying. And, when somebody's so exhausted, the animals, they fall asleep in their stalls. They don't even notice there's no fresh straw.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm so glad to have a place to sleep.
Yeah, when you're
And
tired, you don't even see it.
Yeah, and the windmill gets torn down. Well, guess what?
Keep
You're
working on
rebuilding
it.
it.
Yeah.
Keep working.
It's the distraction.
It's the distraction.
Let's
We
focus
shall
on this
overcome.
while we
Yes.
do what we want to do in the background.
What are we eating?
So secondly, we're coming to you all with the red risotto, and it has a sweet potato base with the risotto. And again, this is gluten-free and dairy-free. It has a jicama and carrot slaw, and it's finished with a red gastrique. And a little micro, yeah. So I hope you all enjoy it because there's a lot of love.
Just take a smell, like just smell it. Like enjoy the smell.
Okay, guys.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much, Chef.
Yes,
I was concerned at first.
Thank you.
Everyone need to get gay.
Oh. That's really good.
Everyone needs to get gay.
Absolutely.
So the other thing is they take away things when they've worn them down to a certain point, because they used to keep singing the song. And the song was, then it became, we can only sing it on Sunday. And then that stopped. And then, no, we're not singing the song.
Well, the first time I read it, obviously it's obvious to pinpoint Napoleon because he's the obvious villain. He's like, you're not supposed to like him. But how I felt about the book and in real life right now, my disillusionment with the politics of our world right now is less to do with a leader and more to do with squealer. Because the propaganda that doesn't even give you the chance to decide after the oppressor's gone what you want to do. Like during COVID was a good example. Like you couldn't even wrap your head around the fact that there was a worldwide disease before. You were getting flooded with all kinds of fear and propaganda and capitalism. And you only get that from the person who's delivering the news to you. And so just as someone who's a part of the media in the major and minor ways that I see it, sometimes on the sidelines, sometimes because we're doing it, you see quickly how scripted it all is. And you see how much of a choice they have to tell you the truth and don't, and how little choice people who are delivering the news on television have in telling you the truth. There's not a news anchor on any station that has quit, that hasn't immediately said they're lying to you. From all of the stations.
Listen.
From all political sides, they're like, listen, now that I'm free, I can go on YouTube and talk my shit.
It's true, yeah.
Here's what's really happening, or here's what they had my hands tied about. And so what frustrates me now is just to know that you're sowing seeds of chaos
intentionally,
which is at this point ruining friendships, lives, marriages, relationships, work societies is really awful.
No, it's truly awful. I majored in broadcast journalism. So I was creating stories. This is my whole college experience. And literally after graduating, I vowed to never go into this field because you're literally curating stories to essentially get a certain rise out of people. And it's crazy because I felt my brain chemistry changing while having to experience this. And so it's like, I can't imagine what somebody who's been in the field for 20 to 25 years, what their whole perspective is. It's crazy. It's insane.
It's got me soul crushing. I mean, because I don't watch the news deliberately, and because I try to live in the middle, and also, to be fair, because music as a specific career takes you in and out of all kinds of crazy worlds from all kinds of crazy people. So you see lots of people who are 99% of the time kind to you. Then you're able to see that like there's what's being told to you and what's actually happening. And what I think most people don't realize with squealers is that it's so easy to buy into the fear or the narrative and forget what's happening in your real world.
So check this out though. I think one of the complicated spaces about a squealer is how you can become a squealer on accident.
Yep.
I use the African American community. So when civil rights was going on, as a community, we were very banded together because we culturally were family and we typically, socialized as such. When integration happened, the opportunity to move away from our family became a thing because we were seeking a better circumstance. Well, in doing so, generations of children were raised away from their family. And they began to buy into perpetuated ideas from other people who had never met their people. And so now those people, because they were cultured a certain kind of way, have an idealism about their own people that isn't necessarily fully true. And it had more to do with the fact that they were so removed that they began to buy into a propaganda idea of themselves. And so, and that's really a byproduct of classism, which is a byproduct of capitalism. And so it's one of those situations where we find ourselves, like I'm in academia, so you go get the next degree so that you can obtain space. If I get the next degree and I stop dealing with the students and I become an administrator, I no longer have the understanding of the true relevance of what the student is dealing with. Therefore, I make decisions for the student that really ain't serving the student. Because in my mind and in my educational background suggests that this should be better for you. You become a squealer serving a Napoleon.
That's funny because that's not funny. It's true, but I was adding that when you said it. What I thought you were going to say is that especially now with social media, especially just everyone having a voice, there's so many. There's just part of my frustration is that everyone's a damn squealer. Everyone's reporting the breaking news, and everyone's reporting spotty information, an opinion. And how many times have you talked to someone, a family member, or someone that calls you something that's totally like that doesn't even make any sense?
Where's your source?
What is your source?
I can't even trust
They don't have
source.
but that's no fact checkers anymore.
That's what you said about authority, of like our tendency to give away authority to somebody on a screen or a platform.
Because they're on the screen.
Yes. Yeah.
Because they're on the platform.
And everybody has a different, I think it, I don't have a visceral memory of this, but I believe it was my grandma who said, even Walter Cronkite ended his newscast with, and that's the way I see it. I believe that's the quote. So it's like, that's how he presented the news because that was his perspective, which has nothing to do with half the population.
And everyone's perception is reality of their mindset, their view of the world, their experience, their upbringing, their community around them. You see everything through the lenses that have been curated throughout your life.
So which to me brings to the idea that one of the things that I've kept seeing, and it's a quote that has absolutely, it's not in this book, it literally comes from scripture, because we talked about what they thought they remembered, but we don't talk about how memories can be easily corrupted by someone else. Not just distorted, wholly corrupted. They can take your memory and say, is that what it is? And so I think about and then we get through and there's, you get it toward the end after Boxer dies and it starts talking about what's happening, and one of the two statements that I actually pinpoint was it said, people, there was no memory of Snowball. There was no memory because the generations had come, they'd gone enough years where there was enough generations that came that you're telling us about the evils of Snowball, and that's a person that we don't even, they never even really existed. And even Boxer, and I thought the quote that came up was, and there arose a Pharaoh who knew not Moses. Who didn't know him. So how do you, if you don't know who didn't know Joseph, who knew not Joseph? They don't know you. And so now we have a history that you're asking us that we're basing all of this stuff that you're doing is based on, but we have no memory of who that is. So it doesn't matter. And I think about how there were so many younger people. I won't necessarily say it was all the young people, but there were younger people with the last couple, not just this last election, but the ones prior, why it was hard for them to engage in things because they don't remember. Why should I care? Why should I care that they're changing? Why should we care that they're changing the history books? We don't know who those people are. Why should we care that they're changing the rules? We don't know anything about that. We don't know why that exists because what was happening is we feel like it was sudden, but there was literally this slow progression into this. Into where we are now. And even for this, there was a slow progression into this because while at the top of the story, we have Major casting vision, there's no explanation. He didn't even have an explanation of the vision. And then I think about, okay, so that song is there, right? But we use songs, I think about Hitler's strategy, how you use songs to teach and indoctrinate. So a whole lot of people, like we, even with kids in Sunday school, we teach them scripture.
It's all indoctrination.
Right. But we literally use the songs to do that. So it's not so much that the songs become oversung. It's, no, that's not the message we want them to know anymore. So we pull that song out of rotation and we put another one in, because now what they need to know is this.
I'm always shaken, speaking as a musician, and it comes up in just about every book that's like this. But I'm always shaken at how art is a powerful tool that's used for usually terrible reasons.
Industry plan.
It's just like, give them a song, give them a movie, give them a cartoon, give them a play, give them a poem.
So check it. I went to go see the movie about Bob Dylan. The song "This Land Is Your Land." I actually did enjoy it. This land is your land, this land is my land. That song, that man went to jail for that song. And so at the time when he put that song out, he went to jail because they felt at the time that was a communist message that he was perpetuating.
This land is your land, it's not mine.
Yeah.
Well, the second verse is pretty.
A little more. We didn't know the second verse quite as much.
But the point I'm making is, he went to jail for that song. And 30 years later, in the 80s, we were kids singing that at programs.
In school.
In school. It became a patriotic anthem.
And then let's go back even further with the Star Spangled Banner. We completely, if we don't do the second verse.
And we never talk about how the Star Spangled Banner did not become the national anthem until the 40s.
Right.
And we also don't talk about how there were other melodies pitched for that song. But we chose a drinking there.
It's the hardest melody, by the way.
Because you're only supposed to sing it when you're drunk.
That makes sense.
It's a pop song.
So
The melody's a pop
you know what
song.
I'm hearing? Okay, so we're talking about how this is totalitarianism is bad, right?
Yes.
But I'm beginning to think it's a spectrum. It's obviously not good, but it's a spectrum, right? Every state, capital state, even the U.S. Has some degree of totalitarianism in it.
Absolutely.
So are we in a totalitarian state? Like,
Right
especially if you think about how, considering everything you just said, are we in some sort of totalitarian state?
It's a good question.
In that the best way is the best. Okay, think about the deluge of noise coming out of the White House now. All this like ridiculous taking over the Kennedy Center, blah blah blah, like everything, like renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. All these things coming out.
Greenland.
Things that don't matter.
This sounds right.
Things that don't matter.
Sounds like
It seems like they don't matter.
a lot of distraction.
Distraction.
That's what it is.
To actually
Noise.
push changes that they actually
that's
don't
the-
want
that's the
scrutiny
chaos.
around, right?
That's
So
the chaos.
are we in some form of a totalitarian
Yes.
state?
Yes.
Yeah, we swung back.
Definitely the attempt.
You say, Eric?
We swung back
We
into
swung
it.
back. Although, I mean, to someone's point, I don't know who said it earlier, but it exists in on both sides.
Right.
Democrat, Republican.
Yes,
It exists
absolutely.
on both sides.
We could back it up 12 months, and I could say this program, this program, this program, this program. Do you think we're in some kind of totalitarian society? And we would all say, yeah. And just like we feel like we are in now. Yes, I believe that. There has to be a third column.
So
there
then-
has to be another way.
So then, how do we break out? If this is it, that means we've been in this for like years, decades.
In your
in fact,
community.
right?
Yeah,
Like,
decades.
Smaller.
decades.
Starting smaller.
Sorry.
I think, because you asked the question earlier, like, are we able to get out of this type of cycle? I would say yes, but it has to start smaller than people realize. We can't do it on that grand scale. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
There are too many forces against. There's a lot of stuff. But
That's great. Interesting. Yeah.
starting with your family, starting with your friends,
neighbors.
starting with your neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, really holding like real conversations with people. Because you just yelling at somebody and them having a different view, we're never going to get anywhere.
That's
Just
the problem.
relevant to the conversation you and I were having downstairs, how I was a little bit, I was happy that on the 28th, people wanted to boycott all these certain, big name things. But Angela can definitely attest to this. I am very, personally, I can only control myself. And I had a lot of great conversations that day with people around why don't you shop like this every day? Why aren't you, you know, because I was like, okay, what business am I going to go to today? Because I have so many different small, locally owned, black or brown owned businesses that I frequent that know me by name. And I'm like, you know, that's the small change that happens, right? I can influence other people. You know, I love that shirt. Where'd you get that? Oh, let me tell you, right? Have you been to Black Market? Like, it's just having those conversations and leading by example, you know, escaping that small town. So my nieces know that it's possible. They don't have to stay there and become teenage mothers. They don't have to, you know, go down that path of manipulation and letting the distractions get you. It's a choice, but to your point, it is about just starting within your community, your family. You know, when I go to Thanksgiving, I'm the person that's fighting with everybody at the table. I'm the disruptor.
I'm glad that you brought that up. I grew up in Iowa, and so I was very, very white. But I had a lot of friends that would challenge their, you know, family members that were okay with like opening up and asking those questions. Knowing that they had racist grandparents and being like, okay, do you let them continue to be racist or do you say something to them? So I think like going back to really small changes, yes, we can make the change. It's not going to be an overnight thing and maybe we won't see it in our lifetime. I hope so. But it starts there for the actual change to start happening.
Yeah. I also think the awareness of how broken things really are. And they've been going that way deliberately by the elected leaders. You know, there was a wonderful movie that Don Amici was in with Eddie Murphy called Trading Places.
One of my favorite movies.
And so they don't, but it was right on the money. It's like, okay, let's take this guy and let's see if he really knows what's going on, right? And I'll never forget him going like this, pork bellies. Well, if you look at the conglomerationization of big farms, of big pharma, about all the things, this is what Napoleon was doing too. And if I was telling the guys earlier, I was in Budapest and Prague this fall and before our election, and people were there as, you don't want communism, you don't want that guy. I mean, and I'm like, you're telling me? And I grew up in New York, but they were all paused like this because they're just regular people. I wasn't talking to government people, but they escaped it. Hungary does have a dictator. And you look, there were 40 world elections this fall. And if you don't think those people are talking to each other, you know, I am just a paranoid New Yorker that think there's really a subway map of all this different stuff going on where people are sharing information, and I think Davos is one of them, that, okay, we'll just throw, what did the Hitlers do? What did, you know, the Muslims do? Well, fear and intimidation. You take away little by little, things start, you know, when they came. And people, there's still people in our country that don't think the Holocaust was real.
That blows my mind, and that's true.
But that's really that's the revisionist history right there.
Right.
It didn't take but like 5 or 6 years for it to happen.
But it's not true though. It was taking much longer. It was happening all undercover. And we just became aware of it recently.
We saw the tip of the iceberg. The building.
And I have a very close friend who is Jewish, and she stays, you know, this was even last year, she was saying, we don't travel anymore. And her husband is one of the top of the food chain people in the entertainment industry. And they can go anywhere they want, but they won't, because they said France and all these different countries, there is an undercurrent of anti-Semitism. And so do we hear about that? No. One of the people that I work with at Vanderbilt, he said, you know, it's really interesting. What you see, he's from Lebanon. He said, what you see on CNN there is very different than what you see here.
I'm sure.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, back to that filter, back to that curation,
of information.
or bleaching of the news media.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just like the whole.
And by the way, the media never, even the presidency, even things as big as the presidency the reason we even talk about it is that it's constantly getting scrutinized, right?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of job you're doing, what your ratings are. The media never have to account for anything. It just keeps on rolling.
Right.
But to see all of these, and I, you know, I'm a creative person too. I'm not the Excel spreadsheet person that can say this program spent this much money. Well, where is all this government waste that they're talking about? Where's all that money gone? It's not going into education.
It sure as hell is not.
Well, I'm going to tell you that part of it, a lot of it doesn't, the waste that they claim that exists doesn't.
They just make things up out of thin air.
They're making it up, and this is me being the kid of one of those of a retired federal worker who understood the process, having to learn how all of that goes. It's they don't get to waste. They have to account for every single dime. They had to account for every single dime spent, every single down to the toilet paper, because you need to know how much every single roll of toilet paper was, how many rolls of toilet paper your office went through this year, because all of it had to go back and be reported so that they can adjust. And when Department of Defense or any other part of the federal government, when they go back to ask Congress for the next cycle of funds for the budget, they can account for every single dime. So there wasn't a lot of waste. When they talk about how they spend that, because all you see is, oh yeah, that's there, this is bad. An example, and this is only because sitting at a birthday party last night with my dad, and he showed me, he said, I know this woman, I used to work with her. He said, I know she knows better than this. She reshared horrible information, all sorts of conspiracy theories and lies. Talking about, and it said something like when they left military equipment in Afghanistan, right? So they don't leave the equipment. They didn't leave the equipment. The rule was it takes too much to transport. It takes years to get all of that equipment. When you're doing something like that, it takes years to get it there. So when it comes back, it would take years to bring it back. But if they're over there and they say, hey, you can leave it here, we'll pay you this price for it, guess what happens? So the Department of Defense has whatever country that is left in, that country writes a check. The Gulf War, the war in the Gulf in the 90s when we were like kids, the equipment that was left there, that country, Saudi Arabia wrote a check to the U.S. to buy the equipment so that we didn't have to pay extra money to send it back.
But then
100%, yeah.
But then it still always comes down to deliberate miscommunication.
Intentional.
Because like you said, your dad said she knows better. And that's the part that's frustrating, is that we see it on small levels and big levels, but it's become, this is I think something that's part of our society now, it's become popular and profitable to just talk.
Yeah.
Just to pick up the camera and talk. You can make a lot of money. Podcasts, all of it. Like, hi.
And absolutely
but
nothing.
being an expert at absolutely nothing, but the problem is that...
You mean Joe Rogan wouldn't been able to make $140 million?
Ruffles and feathers.
No,
Something controversial.
but the thing about it is that the breakdown it's had for society is that everyone is exhausted to the point where, just like in the book, you're so tired by the information that you'll take with it. You don't even see that the books are being banned and that the tyranny is happening because
you just fall asleep.
You're just exhausted
with
the information, the fatigue of the constant barrage of words at you. And if you know better, which I assume a lot of people know better, the majority of people who know better are too afraid to add to the noise to say anything.
Yeah, and then
Or too tired.
And then they feed the dogs. They train the dogs, which I liken to the Proud Boys and the other people that are today. But those dogs and those people, what are they going to do when their food stamps get cut and they don't have any? You know, they're going to find themselves.
They still keep believing, because remember, even in the book, every winter, everyone was hungry.
Right.
They're all suffering.
And every winter they told them, that Squealer told the same lie.
Story.
And rations aren't down, they just been
work is up.
Yeah, they still kept
So focus on that windmill.
Focus on that windmill, the pie in the sky windmill.
It's
and
going to
just like we in this country blame immigrants for taking the jobs. You know, they were blaming other people for coming in and taking the food and the reason that the rations. And every time they would speak about that, I'm like, oh, they're blaming somebody else for the problem. You know, when it's actually the people in charge.
And what happens to the food supply?
Right.
When your
with
brain
the ConAgra
is,
farms when there are no workers.
Yes, when your brain is so focused on survival, there's no bandwidth for creativity, for kindness, because you're literally just trying to keep food in your belly. Yeah. So what is being thrown at us constantly all the time, just the distraction that you were speaking to, us as a collective being able to tap into calming down the nervous system, tapping into your parasympathetic, taking a breath, because they've created this scramble. So any sort of grounding practice, you know, make it weird, make it woo-woo, like whatever you need to do, but like grounding into who you know you are, who your community is, what's happening in your system of like, why am I spiraling out? Like you were talking about that. And being able to come back to who you know you are and leaning into community. And I think it's important for all of us to be here because they can't steal joy, they can't steal community. And if we can lift that up in each other and in ourselves, like that's going to make us, they can't steal that.
And maybe what needs to happen is that the tiny book clubs of the world need to be the same thing that happened during World War II, where communities are meeting and forming resistances under the guise of whatever. And, you know, maybe you're just discussing a book and it's all coded. Or, you know.
Railroad-ish. Right. Now, we're not doing that. That sounds like the feds are coming.
The revolution will not be televised.
No, but that was our hesitation with doing it. When we started, we wanted it to be, I mean, kind of our initial rules were like, do not post online. We wanted it to be underground. The reason for bringing it this way is that I feel like since then we've gotten so disillusioned that you need to be able to remind people, hey, to your point, you have to get together. You have to talk about the banned books and just the books in general. So if we can just be seen doing it, that shows you also how much more extreme it's gotten since the first time we met about this book. Because if it propels you to be more public about conversations that maybe make you squirm or maybe you feel like you'd rather stay behind closed doors, you know that the situation we're in is more dire.
Yeah, but people today don't live in the same shared
That's
reality.
True.
Like
that's true.
Because we don't even believe facts.
Yeah, like everyone has every version of whatever. Pick your flavor of mainstream media, right?
Of life.
Whether it's let's start there, Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, whatever. Those are still silos, and they're giving you versions of the truth. And then most people under 35 have checked out of those. Yes. And they go to podcasts, they go to, what else is it? TED Talk, probably, I don't know how, they go
TED
to TED
Talk, social media,
everything.
Podcasts.
And so it's even more fragmented, right? So there's no sense of an objective,
a communal
truth. Yeah.
But I kind of love that now. I kind of love that now, though. Because
Tell me.
Well, just because like we used to have those big names that we all
Walter Cronkite,
like
freaking
Barbara
we
Walters. We knew the news stations, but now I think it's opened up where people can have. Of course, there's always going to be there spew facts and skew knowledge, but there are other people that really are telling the truth.
Right.
And
so
now there
I
are
think
more
what he's
people.
saying though is that he's not saying that he's not happy with you, that there's no final arbiters of truth out there. It's kind of more widespread, right? It's more crowdsourced.
Which is where
he's saying that there's no objective sense of truth. There's no what are you basing your whole thing
but I
on?
think, but I think the biggest thing is like, let us ask the questions now. Let us have more open dialogue about things instead of just believing in one thing.
Now, see, I agree with that. I hear that. The problem is people don't want to ask these questions no more.
But leave them people behind. She's vain, but we can learn a little bit from all of these characters.
It's hard to start asking.
You gotta lead people.
What are you gonna say?
It's hard to start asking the questions when you feel concerned that if you bring up the question, you're going to be attacked, kicked out of the tribe. You know?
That's get out of the tribe. If you can, get out of the tribe. Get out of the cult. If you can, get out of it. I think that's the biggest thing.
That's what I was going to ask. I'm left wondering if, and I'm not talking about us around the table because I feel like we can discern the truth from lies, but as a whole, as humanity, as we know it right now, can we really handle the truth? Can we really handle the universal truth?
No.
No.
Is the disinformation and the peddling of hope is all of that? Is that because that's what we can handle, not because that's what's necessary?
I would think it's not even about what we can handle. It's about what we've become accustomed to.
That part.
And
what will disrupt our comfort.
Well, and I say this because the word that we're using is truth, and truth. Before we even got to where at a certain point in time, we started questioning facts because there's no such real. We're in a place where facts aren't credible to people. You have to erode people's understanding that facts and truth are together. Truth became a thing that is very subjective. It's my truth.
Right. So
since I can have a truth that is different from yours, then that's how I can mess you up to begin with.
Is that true?
But
in a way. And then, when I share my truth, and what you really mean is when I share my experience,
right?
Or my opinion,
yes.
Right? But we have to actually get back to a place where we learn where we learn how to appreciate and respect facts. Facts have no emotions attached to them.
Wasn't it Jasmine Crockett that said facts matter?
They do, but we literally got into a place where people didn't want facts.
We have alternative facts now.
Alternative facts.
Because it supports where we're comfortable, right? Like
That's
we
what I'm
don't want to
saying.
be pulled out of our comfort
Or at least
zone.
we think it supports where we're comfortable.
So in the book, they talk about the first place that I felt like, okay, they're watering something down, something's about to happen, is when they go 4 legs good, 2 legs good.
Right.
When they
That was the first thing.
Full circle.
It was for, like you're saying, where they're comfortable. Everybody couldn't read. We were trying to make it so everybody can get to the same thing, and that's all they started to repeat.
But
and
notice
then that
who it was.
That's all
But
they
then that's
started
what
to
they turned into.
remember.
And the geese
That's
were
all they can remember.
pissed.
And they forgot everything else on the list of commandments because all they would rechant was 4 legs good, 2 legs bad.
Because it was the
Star-bellied
sheep.
sneeches. I think.
When you I'll say this,
The
it's
literal
gonna sound
sheep.
classy. When you let the simpler, when you appeal to the simple-minded, that's I think as you're highlighting this, that is literally the quintessential way where I'll put it this way. My friend was preaching this morning, and his literal statement was, he said, in times of crisis, he started his sermon, his introductory sentence. In times of crisis, you will not rise to the occasion. You will fall to your lowest level of training. You will go with what you know when things get hard. So I'm not going to go with what the geese wanted me to go with, which is the actual details. I'm going to go with what's simple. 4 legs bad, 2 legs good. That's what I'm going to go with because I don't have enough time to think about anything other than something that's simple.
But the problem in the book and where we are in society right now is that in order for there to be a decision to get uncomfortable or try a new way, it requires discipline. Discipline also, to some extent, has now been twisted into a thing that's anti-liberal. Because when you say everything goes, then you also can't be told when, hey, you have to stand in line here, you have to wait for this. I know you have a problem, but your paper cut's not as important as this bullet wound.
Right.
And so it's interesting because part of why people follow and love a Napoleon, much like the current president, is and what he appealed to was the discipline of it all, is what appears to be toughness, because the alternative seems like a free-for-all, which is chaos. And that's not necessarily, this might sound controversial, that's not necessarily wrong when you're raising kids and when you're governing societies, that there has to be an agreement that we're all going to abide by this, and when bad times come, we're all going to sacrifice this thing to all be better. And even in the last couple of years, we've seen times where going too far liberal is also as when the pendulum swings all the way to the other side, it's just as destructive as the other extreme, and that's the problem. Is we're having a hard time finding the place in the middle. Where to your question, we're out of our comfort zone enough to get better, but we're also willing to understand that we need discipline and understanding. And the discipline is like a bad word now. Like no one wants to be told they have to.
It's my word of the month.
It's not even
But
the happy medium. It's like the lamentation. It's the tension of living in the place, right, where it don't all line up good. Like, you can't be liberal good, conservative bad, or conservative good, liberal bad. It's got to be like it kind of both jacked up, and we need to live in the tension of that and find what's actually real and true and good.
And I think we also have a complication of the people who tend to say what's good and what's bad choose to not abide by that same thing. Like we saw that in the book with the poses. We see that with our current administration, where there are rules there are edicts that are given to the people.
That's it.
That they are not going to abide by. And it becomes a whole, like, that's why you have to have a revolution, because you told me to do a thing that you ain't about to do. And if we all supposed to agree to do this, how you not going to do it?
Right. I mean, is that fair for us to think that the leadership, what it means to be a leader, is it fair for us to think that what it means to be a leader is the same thing as what it means to be the follower? Like, should they be doing the same thing?
Well, if we get down to the fundamentals of our country, we all got one constitution. And anytime that someone deems themselves excused from that social agreement and that social contract that all of this works by, we nullify the social contract. And at that point, anarchy is invited.
Not even invited. You know, at that point, that's what it is.
Yeah, you start to see it popping up everywhere.
Immediately.
Like even at this table, even though you never said that we all have to have respect, what we have done a very good job of is not speaking over each other as we speak.
I hate you. I'm sorry.
But the moment that becomes the norm, that will become the mode of this engagement. And the expectation that you think that when you're talking, we all should listen, but when we're all talking, you're talking over us, that's not going to fly. Not only is it not going to fly, it's not a natural response to a social engagement.
Right.
So the book ends with everything, you know, they're fat and sassy in the farmhouse.
Sassy. Because they ain't brand.
Oh, that's good.
Not all fat
and sassy.
And they're, you know, so what if you're drunk, you fall off the porch, or, you know, there's no resolution to what happens to the animals. Well,
which is powerful too.
It's very powerful because history repeats itself.
Right. Yeah, I think the resolution is you don't know the people from the pigs or the pigs from the people.
Yeah, the resolution is
Because the pigs go from 4 legs to 2.
So
They
if
start
we,
walking on 2. They become 2 legs bad.
to your point, Cameron, if we have already seen before elections that laws and criminal activities, you know, you have 34 felonies, but you can still be elected. Or the Supreme Court is making decisions that really are not in keeping, in some instances, with the Constitution, to your point. So, but people just were like the sheep. They just lay down. And there was no mass uprising about that.
Definitely numb now.
What?
I think people are definitely numb.
And that's the point, is you bombard people with chaos, just like Napoleon kept taking things away. And while you're taking it away, oh, the work hours are now going to be this. And when people are so, all they're doing is they're standing in line like Russia for a loaf of bread. Those people are so terrified to, you know, if you've ever met people that emigrated from Russia, they do not trust people. They don't talk. There's no joy, or, you know, because of a life of that. When someone's listening, like, oh, they're, I probably will be carted away for saying what I've said at this table, because that's the reality they live in.
And they're not too far off, though.
What?
They're not too far off from reality.
Because we on our way.
It happens so quickly because of complacency.
So let me challenge you guys to see the grace on the other side, right? Because one of the challenges for me personally, just reading books general this year, is to understand I don't know if benefit's the right word, but to understand the dark. If there's a yin and yang, there's a light side and a dark side.
Absolutely.
And they're both at play at both times. They're both at play within us at all times as well. And understanding the benefit of the dark side and what purpose it has in being louder at times as opposed to being suppressed. And even though things seem dismal right now, there's a part of me that's also very grateful for the times we live in, because I say this all the time, I feel like I say it every day now, is that you don't learn things from teachers that are nice to you all the time. And teachers have to be tough. The ones that are telling you what you want to hear. We were actually a part of us not taking accountability is also accepting how complacent we all were, how uneducated we all were about government and about how far you can stretch the branches. Even literally right now, everyone's saying, well, how many executive orders can you do? Well, we never really asked those questions before. So now that someone's challenging it, you're discovering not only how many this president can do, but also how many the last presidents didn't do. So there's this thing of like, okay, you don't even ask those questions unless you have someone.
Right.
You can call it tough love or
cross
opposition.
that bridge when you get to
it. But the conversations about civics, the fact that there's a resurgence of books all while you're banning them, like the bookstores are coming back and these private conversations are happening, also brings hope to the fact that while it may seem like it's working, it's actually causing you to be far more educated about these things that literally we've taken for granted. Like liberty is something that you easily take for granted. And access and first world isms, which is a lot of the complaints are about, just are all of our tantrum about not getting the things that we got really easily. That lots of other countries understand very clearly how hard it is to get eggs.
Right.
Every day. And we're just like, what do you mean we can't have 10 dozen and throw them off the roof just for shits and giggles on TikTok every day? So just being in a position where I see, okay, well, how can I learn from what I see as potential negativity or darkness, and how can I be grateful for how I can use these tools to be better myself, and also, if I'm keeping it real, be more cutthroat myself as well. There's also some really shrewd business tactics that are also very much the American way that I think people who are getting used are not taking on, which is part of the reason why this can happen, is that you're also saying, well, maybe you should have been a little tougher. Maybe you should have been more of an asshole, because assholeness works and gets stuff
Be an
done.
asshole to an asshole.
That's a lesson though, because being like turning the other cheek is a way. But we also, now you said this a lot earlier, but it's not the only way. It is a way.
There's a time.
Well, let me tell you about this though.
Flip the tables.
Because you just used turning the other cheek. You know it doesn't mean what we've been taught,
Sure
what we've been indoctrinated.
Well, please teach me.
Okay, so we all think that turning the other cheek is if person. First of all, remember this. Don't ever read Jesus as soft. He was that dude, and he was really, and there was a reason. Like when you look at all of the disciples, there was a reason why within the disciples there was jokers like Peter, who were ready to cut folks' ears off, and why even later on you have Paul. There's a reason why they existed, because that's really more Jesus' personality. He can be meek and humble as a lamb and all that good stuff, but when he said, if they slap you, and it's because being slapped, you're going to be backhand slapped across the right cheek. If you turn the other cheek to the left, you're disrespecting the person that slapped you. So go ahead, tell him, oh, you think you bad and I'm lower than you. Let me go ahead, turn the other cheek, show him. Now he has to see you as an equal. And now, if he slaps you, he has to touch you and disrespect himself. So disrespect me.
I've never heard that before.
Disrespect me. I'll disrespect you. Go back and look at my stories. I actually posted them.
So you've heard my stories.
Yeah. But yeah, like that's the thing. Like we And it actually goes back to a theme in the book of how you take things that are written, and because we stray away from the initial meaning and understanding the cultural context of when things happen, we interpret a thing and we take for granted that the people who taught us how to interpret it to use, like I think I said this during maybe a tiny book club beforehand about how we use a Bible and a gun and we can make a slave that way because we tell you what it means. We don't actually let you really study to figure out what it means. So what it really means is it was a revolutionary act to tell them to turn the other cheek. Like Jesus wasn't saying be a punk. He was saying, he said, make them look you in the eye and do it again.
Well, it goes to the same thing though. I mean, because obviously Jesus is one. Me too. but I mean, whether you believe in him or not, he's one of the most famous, most studied, most talked about figures ever, and he's certainly not taught to you as meek and mild.
But that's not as that dude.
And not as that dude.
And he's really that dude.
And then you start waking one day. At this point, you're like, maybe we should have been taught about how to be an asshole a little bit more.
Because he slick was.
They taught you only Jesus from that perspective because if again going back to American history, in slavery they taught that to them so that they stayed docile.
And Constantine organized the Nicene Council to take out everything from the original Bible that would be in direct opposition to Rome.
Yeah.
So they made Jesus meek so that, they could indoctrinate people. And the priests were the only way you got to God and the Holy Trinity because people didn't read. And so here's religion, and we're going to feed it to you the way we want to have you interact.
Yeah.
And if you notice worldwide, there's a decrease in attendance and membership in organized religion.
But I think too, and what I find really interesting, even in the conversation at this table, is how we talk about authority or powerful figures or people who are assertive and seen as respected and powerful are the masculine. But if I, as a woman, and this has happened to me a lot recently as we're building this business, when I speak assertively or demand accountability from people, I am viewed as aggressive. Yep. And Black women are viewed as angry, right? But even talking about even now talking if he slaps you, right? Like it's always about the masculine. And in the book, it was the masculine, right? The women were looking after, they were grieving the loss.
They were owned.
They were owned, right? So, and we're watching it right now. There was a whole movement around it, the patriarchy, right? So I just find that really interesting that we just, even in this room, we gravitate towards the masculine as the authority.
Well, I think that's also because the authorities in the book were the guy.
Right.
Were masculine.
Yes. But that was that stuck out to me. Yeah.
I'll say this just as a woman who walks into space and is more often than not frequently talking. Y'all can ask Cameron later what they say about me when I walk into space. I think because Western culture, and that's the context we have, looks at a certain looks at leadership in a way that it has to be even not just it's more, are you physically powerful first? And so then this whole notion that physical power also equates to I should be the one with the political power, I should be the one in leadership, I should be the one here. That does that. And so then as a woman, when you walk into certain spaces, and I'll just say it because I've said this before to people, when I show up in certain spaces at certain tables, I don't necessarily show up as a woman. I show up as the N-word, but that's all right. Because that's my posture. I literally if you knew what I was listening to before I have to come into a meeting, I'm trapping hardcore in my head before I walk into a meeting, because the posture that I need when I go into this meeting is you're not gonna look at me and think that you're getting a good clean girl from the Black Awareness Rally, like tomorrow.
You standing firm in who you are. are
right
before you walk into that.
But I was technically trained. My brother jokes like this. My brother literally says about himself, and Cameron's heard it. He said, "My sister is the man our father raised, and I am the gentle soul, the woman that my mother raised." Our parents counteracted how they reared us. So my daddy intentionally poured into me everything about how men go about in the world, doing business and conducting business with each other. So when you shake my hand, you don't get a woman's handshake. You get a handshake like a man.
Yes.
When you do this, that's what you get from me. My mother ensured that my brother wasn't hard, so that when he would speak to women, he's softer. So what you get is children who are we're I'm about to be 45. My brother's about to turn 44. We're balanced, but if you ask me what my gender expression is, what my role is, 9 times out of 10, I'm masculine. That's because in the spaces that I walk in,
So that's not you.
Let's get Chef to explain.
And we also have something else that's interesting, right? Also interesting. All right, what we have here, some of you all have halibut, some of you all have fillets, and some of you all have marinated mushrooms. It has a cauliflower cake, and with that, there's chimichurri with a corn and tomato relish, finished with a little charred zucchini, and nicely finished and garnished with microgreens. So, I hope you all enjoy it.
Bless the Lord, Chef.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
But I do want to say how important it is to recognize how the masculine and feminine need one another, feed off of one another, strengthen each other. You mentioned physical strength. Men have an entirely different physical strength than women, right? Because we are the portal to everything, right? Everything came through a woman.
Tolerance is much higher.
Exactly. But 2 men could pick this table up where it would take all of the women.
No, it still takes 2.
So let me
I get
ask
It all depends on the women.
If in the book, the boxer character had been a female horse and the Molly character had been a male horse, how would it change your perception?
Totally different.
Yeah. Because I wonder what it would have been like.
The male horse is like, yeah, I just want to shoot cubes and I'm out of here.
I don't understand why it's different.
I don't think it would have been different.
Would it be different?
Well, I mean, I get a little confused. Maybe it's because, Claude, what you were saying before about when you're in the music industry, everyone's just kind of nice and respectful of everyone. But I've talked with my wife about this because she's a dietitian, works in private practice, and has a regular job. We're in the music industry, working around creatives and people that have a different perspective around things. But I wouldn't look at boxer being any different and would the same way if it's male or female. And if I have someone that I'm having a meeting with, if it's a male or female, I judge them based on their character and their ability and their wisdom and knowledge and the conversation I'm having. And it doesn't cross my mind to consider anything any differently. And so I get a little confused when people say that they feel like they have to be different in those environments, because I personally haven't had the experience of seeing someone have to, and I've never judged someone any differently.
Well,
and I wonder if it's because of the industry that we're in, or if because some people are just wired in a way where they don't think about it, so it's tough to see it.
I love to ask the ladies who are in the music industry if you feel that way too.
I would also ask, what does your upbringing look like? Because that makes a big difference as well. Because like for me, I grew up with a family of women. My mama was a baby of 12, 8 of them are girls. So my grandmother and my aunts raised me primarily. I don't know weak women. So my expectation for women is that they ought not be weak. So I have an RA who, when something's hard and she don't want to do it, she always say, "Mr. Walls, I'm just a girl." I get that every time she says it because of my upbringing. I think more highly of women than that. So when she says that, I says, you don't have permission to say that about yourself or any other female. But again, my experience with women helped shape my sociology about women. And so I would ask what your upbringing looks like, because I know plenty of other men in the industry that would dare take that a different direction.
Yeah.
Yep. Have you guys have you played Roblox?
No.
It's a game. It's a web game, and I play with my niece, you don't get to see people. You see people from all over the world play these games. They, log in, and there's this one game where you get to build stuff in an IKEA, and people run around and like take stuff around from the IKEA. But you don't get to see them as their real selves. You see them as these characters, and sometimes they're cats, or they're robots, or they're like, aliens or whatever. You don't really get to see if they're male or female. You just see that character that they want to be. But it still teaches you a lot about character building. And for my niece and I, we play it, and I'm teaching her a lot about her character. You don't steal. If you steal from somebody else's house, they're going to chase you down. They're going to break down your house that you built. They're going to terrorize you. Or you don't, like you were saying about turning the other cheek. Mm-hmm. You don't turn the other cheek. So she taught me that if somebody steals from you, you chase them down. And there's there's levels to the game where if it's nighttime, then the employees come and try to kill you. But it's really fun. But it teaches you a lot what we're talking about as far as male and female. Like, to your point, Giovanni, it really, in that game, it doesn't matter. What you see, it's just like your character, what you do. I try to teach her that kindness begets kindness. And then if they're not kind, then you gangster up. And it's just teaching you so many things. It doesn't really matter about your race or your gender in that game. It's really about character and below the surface, below what you actually see, what people are actually doing with their actions. So I feel like there's a way for us in real life to make that same thing translate. We don't have to be so hard.
So hopeful, Stacey. I love it.
So you're pointing out, so a lot of people at this table are in the music industry, right? Would you say that the industry is male or female dominated, one way or the other?
Of course.
Well, I think there's different aspects of it that are, but the thing that's confused me about it is that I own a studio and I'm a producer. I own a facility, so I hire engineers. If I'm interviewing a male engineer or a female engineer, I look at them completely the same. And not because society is telling me to, because I never thought any different about it. I'm just looking at what are your qualifications. Let me listen to some music you've worked on. And do you fit into the community that we have here? But then I hear a lot of conversation in the industry, especially about the recording side, where women are very underrepresented.
They are.
And yeah, for sure. But then there's a discussion that's because men don't want them there. And I've never experienced and maybe I'm just really fortunate and I choose to surround myself with great people, so it just hasn't happened. But I've been working in this business for 20 years and I just haven't seen that happen. So I get a little confused if it's who's creating the feeling of that.
Well, back to your point about start small. We create these communities where we don't allow that bigotry and where we don't allow male-dominated or female-dominated. We really see individuals. I work in an extremely male-dominated industry. I am a woman who has to deal with electricians, plumbers, maintenance men who, as soon as they walk in and I try to offer any insight into what could be the problem, girl, you don't know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And they don't even have to say that to me. It's just how they will literally talk over me, walk past me, not even let me finish a sentence. So that's why I was curious to know if you feel like that the music industry is male or female dominated, because you are very open and you can't even think of the word, but you're really saying that you don't see what you don't see. You don't look at other people, and I hope that this doesn't offend you, but as a white man, that is what you're accustomed to or what your upbringing is or what you might have, that culture that you were around, and it may not be true, but I had never really felt that way until some of the men that I encountered in my business.
The music industry is
shut me down.
The music industry is traditionally, in every way, male-dominated and predatory. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And even more than, I would say, predatory more than even male-dominated. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a business that takes advantage of your innocence and your your talent and your naivete and your dreams of success and fame and an audience and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also easily designed on mafia structure.
Yeah.
So it's the Godfather, his henchmen, maybe one Jessica Rabbit in the group. That kind of just like gets thrown around or tossed around or attracts. That's the system. It's changing, and in lots of ways it's changing because the times are changing in ways they should. But traditionally, I mean, you look at the heads of all the companies in the music industry right now.
Right, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
But to the point he just made, so we just lost Angie Stone the other day. 3 months ago, Angie Stone went on social media and acknowledged that she had for 40 years have not gotten her royalties. Now, Angie Stone has been one of the top R&B songwriters for the last 40 years. And so for someone to have been so notable in the industry, to have been so respected, and for her not to be receiving her royalties for all that time, but where on the flip side, there are countless other males who they may have fight for theirs as well. But I don't know that I've heard anyone who's been in the industry as long as she has, that is male, make that same statement.
Oh, definitely.
No, that's
everybody. I mean, musicians are just screwed.
Her situation is not a male.
Yeah, musicians are just screwed. Like,
Yeah,
they just don't make any
Equal
money.
opportunity screwed.
Yeah, equal opportunity. That's what I'm saying.
Because, you know, they do that in
Well,
the arts.
I think that American corporate is male dominated in a way that's obviously unbalanced, but then to add insult to injury with the music industry is that it's predatory to all creative people. So,
In general, yeah, and I do agree with
so
that.
then you have the
By far.
extra level of musicians are getting screwed. And then if you are a certain genre, certain race, certain gender, then the levels change. Your price tag changes, how much you can, all that stuff changes after you're already getting screwed.
Yeah.
Because as a musician, there's no musician that's getting paid their worth.
Yeah.
Not Taylor Swift, not Beyonce, none of them are getting paid what they're actually worth. For as much work and as much fame and notoriety goes into it, and then you start to parse how hard you have to fight with everything else that's just who you are to be ahead. And in that way, Angie Stone's situation is louder because she's famous enough for it to be louder, but it's much worse for people who are not known as well as Angie Stone.
Why are people quiet for so long?
Huh?
Why doesn't anybody speak up before?
Oh,
They have.
They just don't. Nobody listens.
Well, you don't.
That goes back to the book.
It's not important news to people.
The music industry is the farm.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
If you're,
Because sports is the same way. I tell my students
It's all the same.
It's literally the allegory of sports is literally equivalent to slavery. You have an owner. They play on the field.
They parade them out there in the market.
They literally go on an auction block when they get what's it called? Traded.
But they're on the auction block before they even start. That combine is an auction block.
Yes.
But I think the difference is that they sign up for it. You know what I'm saying?
Millions of dollars.
And they make millions of dollars.
But
Like,
also they've
and
been
it's still a bar.
for that since they were little.
huh?
And there's still a bar.
Because you have what I'm saying is that you have the opportunity if you before you go to NFL or NBA combine, you have the opportunity to say no. You have the opportunity to be like, I don't want to do this. So if you're signing a contract, to your point, like why don't people speak up? The reason why people don't speak up in the music industry is because we signed the contracts. What are we gonna say?
Yeah.
Okay.
and not only that, you're continually asked, how bad do you want this?
Yeah.
And if you're a woman, and I'm the oldest person at this table, but when I started out, I'll be 70 in a couple weeks.
It looks good.
It's like, yeah.
Thank you. But my point is, when I started out, and I had my first publisher meeting. I mean, when I went to ASCAP to meet with a guy there, I genuinely thought he was interested in my music. He locked the door and chased me around the room and demanded a, you know what? And I just looked at him. Thank God I'm from New York. And I said, you're out of your flipping mind. And I wasn't that nice. But, you know, I am one of thousands and thousands and thousands of women, and you could be an actress, you could be a dancer, you could be wanting to get in the advertising agency, and it's just like, well, honey, you know, What are you willing to do for me? And then when rock music started taking off, I remember some bands from Nashville going out to LA and they were hit on by guys. And one of the people that I know said, I'm not gay. And the guy, the A&R guy said, neither am I. And so it's that exploitation because you're in a place of power.
Exactly. It's about exploitation because of a place of power, and in music specifically, at least, and Chuck and I talk about this. We always comparing. We watch a lot of sports and compare just the treatment. Number one, athletes get paid a lot more than musicians do. First of all, which also softens the blow of some of. I'm not saying it's fair, but it does soften the blow of the abuse when you're talking in the millions just to be even sitting on the bench.
Right.
But also there is still a bar at every level that excludes many from it, and to your point, makes you decide, okay, I'm this good, and I'm you're better than everyone else, and so you agree upon what you're going to take. The confusion in entertainment, not just music, is that there is no bar. It's all subjective. So the reasons why you get the opportunity may not be because you're talented. It might be because there's underlying attraction. There's lots of different reasons why music gets kind of murky. But essentially, like Eric said, it's all the farm. It's all the farm. Which is why I'm disillusioned about if there's a fix to it, because what history has shown us is that, as a Black person, I can say this for sure, is that even though you know better and you fight better, the instinct to imitate your slave master in your corporate structure, in your how you treat people beneath you, oftentimes we treat people beneath us like the slaves that you didn't want to be treated like, and that happens everywhere all the time. So it makes me wonder, are we able, and is life long enough, to your point, do they die before we get the information? Are we able to actually overcome that human community behavior? We as scientific animals, is that as much as we're capable of?
Don't throw my question.
I don't have
back
an
at me.
answer. I'm just like,
hear your question. I need the answer.
That was my main thing when I read it. Well, I was like, well, damn, like, are we? I saw the first time I read it, I was looking to relate to actual animals. Like, I wanted to see if I was Boxer or if I was this person. And this time I saw myself in all the characters and saw lots of people I know in all the characters. And I was like, well, then how can we overcome if everywhere I look, this system of this combination of people exists? And is that just what life is? It's just.
I think it's what life is.
That's what I'm wondering.
Because at the end of the book, it's like, whether it was Mr. Jones or whether it was Napoleon, like, the fate of a chicken is the fate of a chicken.
Right.
You don't want to be the chicken.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
And the retirement home is the glue factory.
And if you believe in things if you believe in things like, for example, like reincarnation, right? Then it's the idea that you get the opportunity to come back as different roles within that thing. Because you can be Mr. Jones, you can be the chicken, you can be the pig, and all of them have pros and cons. It makes sense to be all of them, and it makes sense to take the stance they all took. If that's kind of how you're wired. Because even with Napoleon, I just kept wondering, I'm like, is he deciding to be bad? Or does he just not know better? Is he just hardwired to be an opponent?
I think we get confused. I think we get confused because the first thing that we see when we see Napoleon is bad. But what's bad about what he did other than take advantage of a situation that
somebody had to, and he was smart enough to. So why do we label him as bad?
He didn't have to.
I think it was the deception. I think it was just him deceiving and using manipulation and witchcraft to like.
Witchcraft? Hold on. Where'd the witchcraft come from?
No, but
Intellectually, it's witchcraft.
Exactly. But when he doing exactly what Mr. Jones was doing, was that manipulation?
Mr. Jones was a witch. He was witchy.
What's the definition of a good leader and a bad leader?
Let's talk about
like,
it. Good question.
I think my most visceral memory of the OG Tiny Book Club is I said something to the effect of, I feel really bad for Napoleon because that's all he has. He has no friends. He has no community. And all y'all looked at me like I was nuts. And you said something about empathy, and I was like, oh, and now like empathy is now being formed.
That was literally, I remember this.
Yeah, I do too.
That was the theme.
That's
what I thought it was, empathy.
Yeah.
What creates a good leader and what creates a bad leader?
That's a good question.
Like fear, intimidation, control, not so great.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Your choices.
Is it a combination of every?
It's a healthy combination because you need strength and discipline as well, much as you need compassion and softness as well.
Do you think there's a way to think about the farm in the sense of like our self, like when you think about ourselves and our perspectives, our individual perspectives, we all live in our own universe within the broader community. And if you look at the farm as what's within ourselves, and then you look at each character and how all of us have all of that within us.
Yeah.
And then if you look into what Chuck was saying about Napoleon's decisions and stuff, if we think about like, say, finding success in any aspect of life, be it like relationships or a job, we're having those debates within ourselves constantly, and we're changing the rules as we proceed, as our experiences put us in a situation where we need to give ourselves some leniency or some ability.
It's
so
like that's what I'm saying. This is such a cheesy comparison, but is that like the end of Devil Wears Prada? Where she's like, oh, don't be ridiculous. Everyone wants to do this.
Everybody wants
She's like, you've already chosen to be evil. To get this far and be my assistant, you've already chosen a lot of evil steps. But to get here, you've already cut a lot of people down to become this thing. But was she wrong because we cheered her on the whole? We cheered them on the whole time. Maybe she shouldn't have walked away from it.
So when I read it this time, the first thing I thought was, and yeah, I remember my notes. I didn't necessarily particularly care for Snowball either, because my initial thoughts were, who says that the pigs need to be in charge? Period. Now, in reality, I understand because if you know anything about farm life,
they're smart.
Actually, no,
pigs are very smart.
Pigs are as smart.
They're the smartest. Yeah, 100%.
So, like, okay, from a practical sense, understanding farms, it makes sense for the pigs to be in charge.
Snowball was a thug in that war.
But and here's where I'm going. So it makes sense for them to have some leadership responsibilities. But when we talk about leadership, for me, one of the things that I've learned, and this has been because of who I've watched lead, I've learned good leaders and I've learned from bad leaders.
Yes.
And what I think about is, and some people say, and there are bad leaders who've been effective because fear is an effective tactic, but it's not an efficient tactic.
Like, I think we're learning right now. I'm not sure if it's efficient, but I think we're learning from the leadership.
It works.
We're learning.
But I learned it. Forget the political leadership. I learned that with church. Yeah. Because here we go. I'm going to be very transparent. This is very transparent, very real. My first experience, the very first pastor that I ever had in my life, when I was about 12 years old, I was getting ready to go the summer between my 7th and 8th grade year. That man tried to kill my father. I was at literally hit my father. He did it with a hammer in the back of the church. On the way as we were trying to
pastor?
The pastor.
Don't act like you don't know black church story.
I mean,
I wasn't even surprised.
You're like, okay, Sabbath Sunday. Right. Tim's like,
very Baptist, does it not?
Okay. I'm with you. I'm following you. I'm following.
That's leadership. And before then, one of the things that I would literally see is every year that we'd have the same cycle. He would go through the same cycle of speeches, and every year he would get around about July, August, and the sermon would be GIGO, garbage in, garbage out, because that's a rent sermon. So if you take in garbage, it's garbage out. Now, what I realized as I've gotten older and I've had a chance to reflect on is what he was insecure and intimidated because of my father's leadership influence. But my father is a servant. That's his approach to leadership. Very much respected, very much a man of authority, but he's a very calm and mature leader. So I think I was talking earlier about when I was talking to you, Chuck, how we even really got started on that whole AI discussion was I had some questions and there was nobody else to talk to but my AI tool. So the AI tool and I had a conversation about different themes, comparing this book to another book that is also very familiar but kind of takes a different bit, which is Lord of the Flies. And what we dealt with was we went down to, I drilled him all the way down and we got to a conversation about the difference between mature leadership and immature leadership. And immature leadership focuses distinctly on using fear and intimidation and all of that as a tactic in order to maintain control, in order to maintain power.
Yeah.
Mature leadership is more benevolent because it actually looks at itself as I'm responsible for these people. The people I am responsible for, I am also accountable to.
How much
And if you
character inform that? How much is character informed where you line? Like,
a lot. Character informs a lot, but also understanding. But again, like I said, character is the thing that has to be developed. And yeah, I guess I'm gonna go here. So literally, I was talking about I'm writing a book that started when I got my ministry license that I gave back, by the way. But anyway, when I started getting it, was like the question that they asked us in our first prompt as we were in MIT was, what is leadership? And everybody else comes up with all these long treatises. And my initial statement I didn't even use in the class because I'm like, y'all, it's going to be really weird for y'all. But leadership, the components that I came up with, and they were in this order: stewardship, humility, integrity, temperance. But if I put them on a board for you, leadership is what? SHI. And nobody wants that feeling, but anybody who's actually done the work to be to do the internal work to actually be a good leader, a leader that is respected, that is considered kind and benevolent, you realize that leadership is shit because at the end of the day, when I don't feel like it, I have to answer phone calls.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, when I don't feel like it, when I'm tired, I have to do a lot of adjusting and accommodating my needs, my wants in order to happen. So if I look at just blank off the top, interpersonally, the best leader was the one who overworked himself. Boxer, character-wise, he was a better leader because he cared more about making sure that the people, that other animals that were around him had what they needed.
I was gonna say to that because I just because you said Lord of the Flies. I just read this book called James. It's really good book, but it's a Huckleberry Finn retelling from the perspective of Jim, but it's James.
Right.
They know him as Jim because that's what they call him as a slave, but he calls himself James, and he's actually very intelligent. And I think I would love to see some different perspectives of this book because there's a couple mentions in this book where you realize that you get the most about Napoleon because he's the most nuanced, he's doing the most trickery, but there's mentions where you realize that a lot of the characters are wise. Like they say when Boxer starts to work on the land, he does it much more efficient because he knows the dirt much better than the humans did. And they talk about how when the chickens were rebelling, they knew to go up into the rafters to lay their eggs, to keep. So there's all this wisdom that you never even get because, to your point, Snowball decided immediately that the pigs would be the leaders.
Or how Clover even is wise enough. Clover and Benjamin. Benjamin wasn't, I'm just going to survive. Benjamin was literally like, no, I'm smart enough to know I'm not going to work myself to death. This stuff comes
That's why I relate to Benjamin.
This stuff comes and goes. And Clover was smart enough to be like, hey, you can't keep working yourself like this. And I didn't say it, but when you mentioned the word, take a step back to breathe, and literally, how did Boxer die? Couldn't breathe. His lung ruptured. Right.
Jesus.
Like when he fell and they found him and they asked him what was wrong, he said, my lung.
And he said before, I want to get as much done before my lungs give out. Yeah. He said that before. Gotta breathe.
Gotta breathe.
Gotta breathe. That's why you should just be the bird and just take to the wing and just.
Or the donkey.
Or the donkey.
Yeah.
And just.
No,
but it's but in the end, like my takeaway was like I just relate to all the animals that were like a little bit more hands off.
Can we talk about how them dogs wore that cat out though?
Yeah.
They did that cat in.
Dogs will never be. They'll never catch. Cats are always 10 steps ahead though.
I think what you said about you see yourself like we're all on the farm. We all have the farm inside of ourselves.
I think so.
But I think that's the wisdom of integration, of being able to look at all of your parts. I mean, there's therapeutic terms for parts work, where you're looking at them. We're all more than one thing. We all have a universe inside of us, and being able to see those different parts of, like, some days we need to pull on Boxer. Some days we need to be an ass and pull on.
You gotta pull out Napoleon sometimes.
Sometimes you need to pull out different parts of your character when it, like, I don't know if it's serving a greater purpose or, looking to good leader, bad leader. Like, sometimes you just have to get stuff done. And then sometimes you can take a step back. And then I forget what it said in the book. If anybody remembers, please correct me. But, like, every animal worked according to their own capacity.
Yes.
Some people are bulldogs. Other people are cats.
Yeah, no, it's true.
And where
it takes all kinds.
Where do you thrive in the system?
Be honest about that.
Yeah.
because you know what I'm saying, if we're not honest about what animal we are, we'll find ourselves looking, a duck out here barking like a dog.
Yeah.
And also what animal you are in the moment, because knowing when to choose to be Napoleon as opposed to when to be Molly can greatly change the outcome of a situation.
Yeah.
And I think part of what I related to with Napoleon this time, why I didn't hate him, was this season of my life, I'm just like, it's time for a little more Napoleon, because if not, you feel abused, you feel like you've been walked over, you feel like you've been taken advantage of, and that is equally as frustrating as we don't know what was going on in Napoleon's brain internally. We were told that he was secretly doing things and but he must have a story and a reason for why. But it's important that you're able to tap into all of them. I think that's instead of shunning it and saying, I'm not Napoleon, you have to understand that it's a tool.
I think being crafty like Napoleon, well, let me rephrase that. Being cunning, you said that right. Being cunning like Napoleon is a tool. However, being self-serving like Napoleon is a problem. Because Napoleon was able to get production out of the farm. However, it was at the detriment of the farm. And if Napoleon would have been more considerate of the rest of the animals, much more like Snowball, they could have found a medium. But the thing is, Napoleon seeking the position of power from the beginning was the beginning of the corruption of the farm. So the farm was at a detriment because him taking leadership, like he lied to get it, right? And so he had already poisoned the water just to get the seat.
I think if you're saying that we all have these characters in us,
I think it's within us.
Then depends on which character is leading will determine how you present or what you do, right?
What are you using
so
it for?
Napoleon, maybe at that point, he was just like, crap, I really want to be Snowball, but I'm not smart enough. So if I'm not Snowball, I'm not going to have anything. So I'm just going to be the guy. I'm just going to be Stalin.
It's kind of like a...
So, which is what it was. And he did that. But then I'm reminded of, again, hard not to compare it to or link it to 1984, because in 1984, he describes the hierarchies, the class hierarchies very well. So you have the elites who just want to protect their position, right? And they want from everyone else. You have the middle class who feel that they're crunched the most and want the elite to be fit, right? Or no, they want to be elite. That's it. They want to be elite. They don't really care because they struggled out of they have the poor. So it's really like the poor, middle class, elite. The poor are the only ones who are interested in justice. Apparently, we're the ones being crunched. We're the boxers. We're the ones being decimated, right? Crunched, spilling blood for the work, and then being sent off to the glue factory. They want justice, and then somehow they make it into the middle class, and the middle class they look up and they're like, "Ooh, I definitely want to be poor again." But man, these guys have their boot on my neck. I wonder if I could beat the Napoleon. And then that's what they're thinking about. And then they move up and they start the whole cycle.
That's the cycle.
Over again.
Everyone wants to be the Napoleon, and so when you get it's your chance to be in power, you create the same system that you just were being tortured in.
See, so I have a question for Beth. Because in light of speaking about good leadership, I've heard so many people from all walks of life talk about how Jimmy Carter was an incredible leader. Were you a part of that administration? Do you know anything about
and why was he a good leader?
Yeah, why was he
this is going to sound terrible. So I grew up in New York, and I grew up in the bastion of Republican supremacy in New York, which is Westchester County. So when Jimmy Carter was elected, he was not really looked upon favorably as a leader because of all the other past presidents having been these big figures, generals, just all of that. Plus, he was a mild man. New York is like,
Tough.
they'll eat your face off if you don't say, get out of my face, And so we didn't hear that much about him. There were 3 news networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS. I didn't know that much about him or his administration because of, we got our news from the New York Times and the networks. And to Claude's point about being a New Yorker, the South was kind of like, oh yeah, there's a New Yorker cartoon that here's New York, and then there are little tiny things around it, which is the rest of the world. And so, to your point, Tam, he just was kind of namby-pamby, Now, when Watergate happened, we knew all about that. When Vietnam happened, I was in high school. We so badly wanted to be cool and do the protests. And then when the guys started coming back from Vietnam and nobody cared, it was like, what? So that disillusionment, I think Jimmy Carter and Rosalind were just everybody thought of him as the peanut farmer.
How he campaigned.
It's just like Lamar Alexander when he started campaigning. When I was in college here, he wore a red flannel shirt and walked the state. And he was this mild-mannered guy with nothing who used to play the piano. Well, he retired very, very wealthy because he played the game. I don't believe that's who he was inside of him. He also married a very wealthy woman.
So there's that part.
Yeah. But, I think Jimmy Carter, it said a great deal about him at his funeral that all the acting presidents were there and very respectful. They all had very good things to say. And I think he's one of those leaders that his contributions were overlooked because of the sensationalism of everything else that was going around in the world. Henry Kissinger was more well known than he was.
I think that could be the part of the mark of a great leader is that they're quiet about when their leadership. Quiet, calm, assertive, but they can make decisions and they understand that the principle is bigger than them. He wasn't necessarily trying to be a big figure. He was trying to
get the job done.
He was trying to make an impact.
And he cared about history. Right. He cared about methodology and people. He wasn't a celebrity. And we entered into a celebrity presidency.
I want to touch on that leadership because that's interesting. I think I want to talk about leadership because the press and media changes everything about how you find your leaders.
Yeah. And also with there are no peanuts.
Thank you.
This here is you're welcome. This is a gluten-free, dairy-free dessert. It is a cinnamon roll blondie. Yes, with a spiced rum caramel. And it's finished with the mint leaf.
Can you come to my house tomorrow?
Yes.
Can I say, since it's like our 4th course, and I don't know what's going to happen after we finish this, I just want to, because I might just like pass out on the floor here. Yeah. I just want to thank Chef Cleveland and the incredible staff. I know they're all over the place right now. The Lost Spoon.
The Lost Spoon. Always remember, always remember, don't set the table without us.
That's right.
Right. But everything has been just like
A1.
You're A1, beautiful,
A1.
and we couldn't do this without you either. You're a day oneer for this whole Tiny Book Club thing too. So thank you
so much.
Seriously, thank you.
See that right there? That's that Jimmy Carter leadership.
That's that Jimmy Carter leadership right there.
He didn't say nothing.
And didn't even need a peanut to do it.
Yeah.
As we wrap up, I was gonna just take it a little bit off the book because I just wanted to give everyone like who wants to speak a last moment. Just also talk about personally, because I know personally I know you guys. I know there's some personal amazing things that have happened because of Tiny Book Club. I'm sure they'll get you for some testimonials, but there's been some love connections.
Met my wife at Tiny Book Club.
You know what I'm saying?
Forever grateful. Eternally grateful.
Eternally grateful.
I don't know what she'd say, but I am definitely.
And I mean, two-thirds of the Chandels are here, but I mean, some of you guys may not know this, but some of the very first, maybe the first performance,
The first performance
ever was in front of the Tiny Book Club family in the Hot Wiggle, like just presenting. Here's what we're working on. Let us know if we're crazy with this thing. Happy to see you.
Crazy.
We sound crazy. And I mean, Carly, who was just like a day one in every single way to all the shows, the Tiny Book Club, which is a big part of the reason why we're all connected in deeper ways than just books and dinner. This is family. So this won't be the last one, but literally everyone here, as you can tell from the conversation, means something to each other, whether we realize it or not. And I'm going to also say this because we never did say this, Chuck and I. Tiny Book Club started and it happened. And then we've been living in Nashville for the last 8 or 9 or whatever years. And one of my most proud moments is seeing you guys out there and knowing like Tiny Book Club was the reason that the friendship happened, or hearing that some cool connection or job or opportunity happened because 2 people met or fell in love, and like that just means that we're doing something right here. And the community spreading. So thank you for that, because we hear about that a lot more than you guys know about. Just Tiny Book Club out there in the world for real. This means the world to us, and this is not going to be the last. It's the first of many. So I know it means a lot for us, for you guys to take time to come out here and just do this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tiny Book Club is back.
So you just say our first Tiny Book Club on camera was a success.
Yeah, man, it was so good, man. Everybody read the book. Everyone showed up. Everybody showed up. Everybody had something to say, and they had their own unique perspective.
Yes, I mean, this clearly needs to be the first of many. We did this because we knew we wanted to come out of hiding and start doing this more often, not just like this, but in your city.
Yeah.
We're doing this in Nashville. We want to do it all over the country, all over the world. So hopefully this was something else impactful to you, and you'll let us know if you want to see it done where you are. That's the goal.
But we couldn't do it alone. We got to give a special shout out to the Lost Spoon and Chef Cleveland.
Absolutely, that food was delicious. So good. The reason we look so good is shout out A. Kirkland Films.
Yeah, man.
An entire crew that literally showed up and made it super easy and made this whole thing possible. We're grateful.
Yeah, this is the first of many.
And if you don't mind, I'm going to thank ourselves, because shout out to Weirdo Workshop.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, first of all, we were filming, but also the whole team. Mike Guru Johnson, Brittany Guiden, who literally helped pull this whole thing together. It takes a village.
It takes a village, for sure.
And hopefully, our village impacted y'all, because there's going to be more of these. Tiny Book Club started here, but it's about to be a part of the world. Let's go.
Yeah.
Until next time, y'all.
Peace.